Hey, good morning, and welcome to today's episode of Wisdom of the Soul, brought to you by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Last time I checked, I'm Michael Benner, and happy to be with you today. I look forward to this class very much throughout the week. I'd like to talk this week about empathy and compassion, and the title, actually, as you noticed if you read your newsletter, is Beyond Empathy and Compassion. What is beyond empathy? Um, I was tempted a week ago to talk about the rising violence in the Middle East because of the mere fact that this is a program about consciousness and not politics. And yet, I think that makes it all the more important that in that context, we talk about the opportunity really that's presented itself to rise to a higher understanding of what's going on than is portrayed in the media. I say I was tempted to talk about it last week, and I decided to put it off for a week just to give me some time to think about it, because it's really a gut punch for me. It's funny, I don't mean funny, ha, but funny, odd, that we've lived all of our lives with this violence. Israel became a state in 1947, the year I was born. So throughout my entire life, and I presume all of your life, we've seen this violence and conflict. And since we're going to do a program on empathy and compassion, I thought what better way to begin that discussion than in the context of what's happening in the Middle East. It's a complex situation for a number of reasons, to a large degree because it's so easy to conflate the actions of a government with its people. And I would hope that not all Americans would be judged by our past administrations, whomever they be. Um, the fact that I could go to the war in Iraq. I guess that stands out to me. We're so horrified by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and we actually could see the victims of that war, Ukrainians, interviewed on TV. When the United States invaded Iraq, oddly, we never heard from Iraqis. Now, curiously, we're not only getting the Israeli side, which we've always gotten, but we're beginning to hear from Palestinians. And there is more empathy, or key word for the day today, in media coverage of this war than I've ever seen in past wars in which the United States has a very strong vested interest. We certainly have an interest in supporting Israel. Israel could not exist without American financial and military support. But I think what this current administration recognizes is that we have an interest in there being peace in the Middle East and peace in the world to dissuade China from invading Taiwan and Russia from continuing its aggression in Ukraine. Here's my message. We have a structure in the brain called the amygdala, commonly known as the fight or flight center, which divides the world. This is where the metaphysics and the consciousness comes in. The fight or flight center, the amygdala in the brain, tends to divide the world into us and them. Binary thinking to an extreme degree, to a point of almost absolutes, where our tendency neurologically is to view anything that is different as opposite. This is absurd, of course, but it happens all the time. You're either with me or against me. America, love it or leave it. Well, if you're not a right-wing reactionary, you must be a communist. If you're not a Republican, you've got to be a Democrat. This duality, which there's certain evidence for duality. I mean, and there's certain situations where it makes sense. You know, hey, we're all going to the ballpark. Are you coming or not? There's really not much of an in between. Well, I'll drive halfway to the. I'll go halfway to the ballpark with you and then come home. You're either coming or you're not. But to overlay that with every decision, to every concept and point of view, is to deny the maybes, the some of the times, the neither, the both, the permutations and combinations and variations in the middle. We did a class here a few months ago called The Middle Way. Excuse me, I'll clear my throat in a minute. This is a concept in Buddhism that is really quite profound when you dive into it. And it suggests that not only is there a middle way, but that that's where truth is found, not in the extremes of all of this and none of that, or all of that and none of this. So when we look at a conflict like what's happening in Israel, the tendency in most people is to choose a side, as if it's some kind of football game or soccer match, rugby or tennis. The good guys and the bad guys. And there are no good guys in war. And there's no winning in war. It's one of the reasons that I'm stunned that it continues. And then I'm reminded, oh yeah, it's a very profitable thing. Well, that upsets a lot of people who really believe in the necessary evil that is war, to defend your country. And all the emotional pride that we have invested in the bravery and the courage, the heroic efforts of men and women who sacrifice so much, who give their lives, and flag and country and all of that. And you run up against that when you encourage pacifism and the abolition of war. We abolished slavery when most people said it couldn't be done, and only 1/3 of Americans supported the abolition of slaves. And yet it was accomplished. You might argue through war, but not to prolong the discussion, I don't think the war, I'll say it this way, the Civil War, the American Civil War went beyond slavery. There's much more at stake than slavery. But this either-or mentality, this tendency to think in binaries, blocks our empathy. It inhibits our compassion. It prevents us from being the loving beings who recognize harmony and unity. And this is the cause of all suffering, not just war. That's why this is so important. The cause of all of our suffering is the illusion of separation. The fear and the anxiety and the stress, the worry, the doubt that arises as a result of the loneliness and the alienation that we feel, the struggles that we have about our identity as unique individuals, and who loves me, and why am I lovable, and why do I feel like I don't fit in, like I'm not cool enough, or part of the gang, or a member of the clique. This starts in junior high school. We don't have a part of the brain that's wired for love and harmony, for safety, for empathy and compassion. It has to be developed. We haven't evolved to that point yet. We have the potential. We're standing on the threshold of developing this ability, this consciousness, this expanded awareness, this capacity to love, to see ourselves in others and them in us. And surely this group in this class has compassion for both sides. The horrors that have been visited on each side by the other, not the people. It's not the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. It's their right-wing reactionary governments. Israel's government is very, very ultra-conservative, very far-right, very nationalistic and extreme. Hamas, if you can call it a government, they were elected at one point. They're more of a gang or a terrorist organization, but it's an autocratic government. Again, ultra-conservative, very far right-wing. These are two far right-wing autocratic governments fighting a war. And you can say, well, Israel is more democratic. It's much more democratic. Yeah, in many ways, you have to concede there's many freedoms if you're Jewish. But we have to be careful to recognize that many people will perceive criticism of the Israeli government as anti-Semitism. And we should be free to criticize any government, the government of Israel or any other, without being called racist or bigoted. It's the government we have the issue with, on both sides. That's who's waging the war. But the people are the victims. And curiously, as I said, we're able to see the Palestinians and hear from the Palestinians. There are Americans married to Palestinians and Palestinian Americans who are in Palestine. You know, maybe they were born in Iowa of Palestinian parents, but they're in Palestine now and speak very clearly, such that we can get a pretty even-handed view of what's going on there and just how tragic it is. It's really not about religion, because we have seen the same thing in Ireland, where Catholics and Protestants are both Christians, but they kill each other over who loves Jesus most. So in a sense, you could say, well, that's about religion, but it's intra-religious rather than inter-religious. Makes it even more crazy. But I look at the Crips and the Bloods. I wonder who even remembers the Crips and the Bloods. These inner city gangs, you don't hear much about them anymore because the Mexican drug cartels have taken over the drug business, the illicit drug business in the inner cities. So the black youth gangs are not so involved in that as they used to be. But here you have not only Los Angeles, but other cities all across the United States, Chicago, New York, Philly, San Francisco, gangs of identical young black men oppressed by systemic racism and poverty, uh, a lack of decent education, poor housing, virtually no promise for a brighter, successful future, who square off against each other based on who's red and who's blue. And so we're exactly the same poor black inner city men, young men, exactly in exactly the same situation, suffering in exactly the same way. But somebody has tricked us into squaring off against each other, triggering that amygdala at the base of the brain, that fight or flight. You're not me and I'm not you, and we're going to kill each other because you've got a red rag and you've got a blue rag. And yet we can send men to the moon and take pictures of Pluto, put magnificent telescopes into space, do miracles in the operating rooms, modern medicine and surgery and the technology of computers. I don't know if you guys are playing with Chat GPT, but that's a mind blow. Somebody asked me to write them a testimonial and include these points, and I asked Chat GPT to do it. It's like, act like an expert public relations person and write a testimonial including these bullet points. 2 seconds later, it was just better than anything I could write. And that has such wonderful promise, and yet there's a specter that goes with that too. So we have all this incredible technology. We can do so much, and yet we're killing each other over what color rag we carry in our back pocket. This is crazy. And the antidote is empathy and compassion, because this is the bridge, or these are the bridges to true love. And I don't mean emotional love. I mean the spiritual love that we have to define is the absence of otherness, the love that destroys separation and allows us to see that despite the beauty and the richness of our diversity and individuality, we have much more in common than not. And when you reach out, not mentally, but emotionally, as an empathetic person, and you train yourself and you practice empathy and compassion, as we'll discuss today, you not only impact the world in a positive way, you completely transform yourself. You can become devoted to being an empath, to being less judgmental with your brain and more empathic and compassionate with your heart. And that's the essence of what I'm going to talk about. And that's as much as I have to say about the Middle East. It's not political in my worldview. It's not religious in my worldview. It's insanity. It's just crazy. but it's institutionalized. These are giant profit-making machinery, socioeconomic political machinery behind this with enormous momentum. And it's not easy to pull the plug and stop war. Personal transformation is the only way to accomplish it. We have to, as Gandhi said, be the change that we wish to see in the world. We have to work on the local level. You stop war by changing the way you drive on the freeway and on the highways. Does that make sense? You can stop war by the way you treat a waiter or waitress, especially if you're upset with the food. That you can stop war by practicing kindness and forgiveness and tolerance and patience and generosity. That's the way you stop war, one person at a time, and let that begin with me. All right. That's our topic today. Let's do an opening meditation, and then I'll have more to say about building the bridges of empathy and compassion, and then we'll talk. We'll talk a little about what's on the other side of the bridge. So close your eyes and relax. Let's do a group meditation. Settle into your chair. Feel the chair or the furniture upon which you sit supporting you. Take a few slow, deep breaths, and particularly as you exhale, create and sense a feeling of relaxation. Muscles unwinding, muscles letting go. Feel the relaxation, almost as if your suit of armor is dropping away. As those muscles relax, you can imagine the armoring dropping to the floor. I can hear the clink as my armor hits the floor. For the next 15 minutes, you don't need it. So put it down. You're safe. You're in a safe place. You're with a group of people that, just like you, is beginning to promote that safety with feelings of deep relaxation. After having taken a few slow, deep breaths, by now you've no doubt begun to breathe normally. If not, do so. In other words, allow your body to breathe itself. And bring your awareness to the bottom of your nose or any other spot. Might be your belly or your chest where you most notice the body breathing itself. Most people find the bottom of the nose, the very point where breath enters and leaves the body, is a good spot to settle in. And identify as the observer of your breathing. To evolve from being a reflexive reactionary to a more conscious, sentient being who considers their options and the consequences of their actions before they purposefully initiate them. We need to detach from reflexive thinking and to create this this awareness of non-attachment. The tradition for thousands of years has been to watch your body breathing and identify as the one who watches. You could at any time, as you did a minute ago, deliberately and purposefully take a nice, big, slow, deep breath. Or you could hold your breath, or you could pant, in which case you are the breather. But right now, you let go. Notice that the body breathes itself. It never did need your cooperation or your intervention. You stand back as the witness. That's pretty cool. Consider how remarkable it is that your body breathes itself without you even being aware of it. You don't need to manage it any more than you need to be concerned about whether your heart is beating or food is being digested or your body temperature maintained or blood pressure or scores of other reactions that are handled autonomically, automatically, on an unconscious level by a system that really does not need your attention, freeing you to be that attention. Consider that. How does it feel to be so free that you don't even have to be concerned about staying alive? The part of the miracle of being is the freedom to move your awareness wherever you wish, to focus your attention wherever you wish, and so identify as that awareness. I am that. I'm the awareness behind my behavior. I'm the awareness behind my emotional feelings. It's variable, right? Sometimes you're much more aware of your behavior and your feelings than at other times. It's a variable. Sometimes I may even be aware of the fact that I'm thinking, though most of the time I just think without being aware of it. How many of those thoughts? How often does your thought process involve any awareness at all? How often do we just think without being aware that we're thinking? So by watching your breath, not as the breather, but simply the one who observes the body breathing itself, you become non attached, feel the letting go of that responsibility. And recognize the higher, greater, much more central and significant responsibility to be the awareness above the behavior, the thoughts and feelings. Even your perception of the world around you Stand above that. Elevate your perspective. Stand back. Be the awareness. Look around. Consciously, deliberately, purposefully pay attention to your breathing. And in time, you'll be able to watch yourself thinking. You'll be able to study the mind. You'll recognize patterns. Oh, there I go again. Feeling sorry for myself. Thinking I have a rough life. Wondering why life is so difficult. And how much of it we can write off as being done to us by others. So we obsess on trying to control others, or merely on judging others. And you sort of miss the point. You're not watching yourself then, are you? There's so much to be aware of, and it's a journey, not a destination. But because awareness is consciousness, is love, the ultimate awareness is recognizing that there's only one of us here. Life is a single thing. Oh, it has many branches. It manifests in form as the multiplicity. Where do you want to begin? Electrons, molecules, solid material things. You want to look at the world materially. Because that's why it appears so separate. Everything is separate. We feel like billiard balls on a pool table rolling around, crashing into each other. No two objects can occupy the same space at the same time. Liquids could, gases can, but not solids. And we're solid, right? We're in separate bodies. We have our own DNA, our own fingerprints. We have face recognition on our telephones. Clearly, we're individuals. And unique at that. A universe that won't even replicate snowflakes. Sort of suggests there's a reason for this diversity. Sort of points to why we exist at all. There's no redundancy in the universe. And for most people, that's the end of the story. I am not you, and you are not me. And we are separate, and it's scary as hell to be all lonely and alienated and feel like we don't fit in, and so desperate for others to like us and accept us that we'll jump through hoops and dance to their tune and even betray ourselves in hopes of being accepted, loved, cared for. But by developing our awareness, by expanding our consciousness, by using empathy and compassion to understand love as conscious awareness, what we become aware of is the unity beyond the veil, the one life, the wholeness of all things. Yes, as matter, we are separate and unique. But as energy, as spirit, we are a unified field, a universal field of energy, which cannot be partitioned or divided up or separated or grouped until it condenses, or if you wish, incarnates into form. So we are both energy and mass. We are both spirit and matter. We are both the one in the multiplicity. So how does the separate individual discover its oneness? We have to build bridges of empathy and compassion and loving kindness and equanimity and acceptance of impermanence. We have to face reality and see ourselves in each other. That's what we're all looking for. Connection. Why just holding hands or somebody massaging your shoulders or a reassuring gentle touch on the elbow. It doesn't take much. Animals love it too. That's why we call them pets. We love to touch them. They love to be touched. We pet them and call them pets. Even big animals. If you got to approach an elephant, first thing you would want to do is touch it. Hardly a pet. Or you want to hug a tree. You know you want to hug a tree. You remember what it was like to sit in a tree. Don't tell me you've never climbed a tree. I bet it's been a lot of years. God, it's wonderful to be in a tree, to hug a tree, to sit in the ground beneath a tree. And don't even get me going on flowers or sunsets or panoramic views. It's all connection. That's why you get quiet and your problems fall away when you go into nature. Because your sense of self as a unique individual falls away and is replaced by an awareness that you are more than this body rattling around in this world of form. This is not just the end of war and domestic conflict and disputes at home or over your back fence with your neighbor. This is how you end the internal turmoil that is the source of our unhappiness. The real deep, profound inner source. And if you don't think that's true, if you think all of your problems are being caused by other people or institutions or circumstances beyond your control, see how long you can sit alone with your thoughts quietly in a room Turn off all the media, close the shades, close the curtains, turn off your computer, turn off your phone. There's a scary thought. Turn off your phone. It's terrifying, isn't it? And sit quietly in a room and see how long you can tolerate that loneliness. And then you'll find the real cause of your fear. We have no idea who we are or what we're for or why we're here or any of that. We're far too busy judging other people, petitioning them for acceptance. There's just one of us here. It's just us, gang. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say it again. Forgive the repetition if you heard me. You are the apple in the apple tree. You're not that apple. I get it. You're this apple. There's a bunch of apples over there that are not you. You are this apple. But you're also the tree. And you're not just the tree, you're also the earth in which the tree is rooted, in the sky in which the tree expands, rooted deep into the earth, reaching into the sky. And you're the forest. And you're the planet's ecosystem. So you're the rivers. You're the lakes and the oceans. You're the land. You're the mountains. You're the air. You're the sunshine. And you're the apple. You're the single individual apple. You're not that apple. You're the apple, but you're also the tree and the forest and the planet and the solar system and the galaxy and ultimately the universe. To love, in a spiritual sense, is to recognize that you're also the universe, and primarily the universe. And there's nothing or no one within that universe that is not you. We develop that with empathy and compassion and love and kindness. And it's an effort, it's a commitment, it's a non logical, initially emotional, and then spiritual. The portal of spirituality is through the emotions, not the head. You can't think your way to an understanding of who you are as the one life. You have to be carried, swept away on the currents of love and passion. Does that make sense? It's emotional intelligence that leads to spiritual awareness. It's the paradox of the one and the many, and you're beginning to figure it out. And that's a pretty accelerated, when it comes to looking at where you stand in, in the unfolding of evolution, that's a pretty advanced concept. I don't have to choose or. I can lift my awareness from a you or me world, this or that, to a you and me world, this and that, to varying degrees. I could go to a ball game without needing to see one side as the good guys and one side as the bad guys. And if there's a great play that's made, Like in football, a long pass and this marvelous ability of a quarterback to fall back and throw a ball 40, 50, 60 yards downfield in this high arching, just as this running target reaches that point of intersection. It's quite a miracle, actually, if you think about it. Catches that ball with people all around him who want to bring him to the ground. You can cheer for that no matter who does it, which side. It doesn't have to be the good guys. You can cheer and appreciate what a great play it was. Somebody hits a home run. Doesn't matter which side, the good guys or the bad guys. Far out, he hit a home run. A round ball, he hit a round ball with a round bat over 400 feet. That's pretty far out. Yay. We don't have to, oh, but it's the wrong side. It was the bad guys. It was the visiting team. Boo. We want you all to die. Go away. You're the bad. It's a primitive brain that is hardwired. It got us through the evolution of pre-Neolithic times, but we're relatively speaking somewhat civilized now. We don't need that reactionary, that reflexive fight or flight. And we have research that proves the more you meditate, the smaller this amygdala becomes. And reactionary people who are always frightened, who surround themselves with guns and absolute rules and rigid dogma, have larger amygdalas. If they meditated, they would shrink, literally. And while the amygdala, the fear center in the brain, is shrinking, the part that divides everything up into bits and pieces, guess what grows? Everything else in the brain. The gray matter, the white matter, the frontal lobes where the executive functions are, the neocortex. You evolve, you get a bigger brain, literally from meditation. Do the research. You don't have to believe me. Meditation literally grows your brain, but it also shrinks that amygdala, that fight or flight center that's dividing the world into pieces and making you afraid that there's someone here who is the other. So open yourself. Just open yourself. Stand open and receptive to all the love, to the embrace of the world, to the peace and the harmony that is inherent and innate, that lives within you perpetually and only needs your awareness. Happiness is not an attainment, it's not an achievement, it's a matter of letting go of your unhappiness. It's that simple. When you release your fear and your worry and doubt and nervousness, and you sense that somebody's out to get you, or somebody doesn't like you, or you have this exaggerated need, this dependency on others to make you feel okay, practice putting all of that down. And you let go of all of those worries, all of that unhappiness, you'll find that love and happiness and joy, happiness for no reason, joy, bliss, ecstasy, nirvana, samadhi, satori, heaven, has been with you all along, waiting inside for you to release it, to liberate it. You've already got it. Not only do you, look at everything we've put ourselves through trying to find love, and here it is all along, hiding behind your fear. Let go of everything that's not love. Let go of the illusion of separation. Devote yourself to empathy and compassion. We'll talk more about how. And bring this wonderful feeling of connection, this feeling of harmony, this feeling of wholeness and unity with you as you reorient toward the waking state. And feel the chair again. Bring your awareness to the chair, the furniture you sit upon, your meditation pillow. Remember the room in which you sit and take a nice slow inhalation, big deep breath filling your lungs. And as you exhale slowly, open your eyes now. Eyes open now, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine. Welcome back, eyes open, wide awake, back in the room, feeling better than before. So what are these bridges? How do we do this? Let me begin by just touching on the fact that you can go too far with empathy. There is too much of a good thing here. You've probably heard empathy described as standing in somebody's shoes, uh, standing in their shoes. If you could put yourself into their shoes, how do you think they would be feeling, or how would you feel if you were in their shoes? Um, that's okay as far as it goes, but when you start walking around in other people's shoes, that's where codependency begins to be a real problem, and where we set ourselves up for manipulation by narcissists and other controlling and self-centered people. I did a class here a few weeks ago in codependency. It's a complex topic. There are CODA groups, Codependence Anonymous, that help people understand, unravel the complexities of a codependent relationship. But it's basically a swap. It's a rejection of responsibility for your happiness and the need for others to do it for you. So since I feel undeserving, I don't love, trust, or respect myself, maybe a little bit, but not as much as I could or should. And so I'm going to give my life away, basically. I'm going to betray myself in service to another. I'll call it love. And I may go through all kinds of, what do I want to say, exaggerated, amplified, distorted efforts to make it look like this beautiful romance, this loving sacrifice that you make to try to please others and accept responsibility for their feelings in hopes of earning from them the feelings you have not been willing or able to take responsibility for providing yourself. Hey, I'm lonely and empty and unloved. You're lonely and empty and unloved. Let's get together and we'll fill each other out of our emptiness. What sense does that make? I'm empty, have no love. You're empty, you have no love. Let's to get together. I'll love you if you love me. Isn't that romance? Look at all the songs. Or listen, I'm so visual. Listen to all the songs, the lyrics. I need your love. I want your love. I can't live without your love. I've got to have your love. My life has no meaning without you. I'm sorry, gag me with a spoon. That's pathetic. Real love is sharing out of your bounty, out of your abundance of self love and self respect and self trust and a healthy view of who you are as the one and the many, the one and the individual, the whole enchilada and the apple. I'm mixing my metaphors here as the apple tree, the forest, and the apple. No, healthy loves is a beautiful thing. It's sharing and caring. It's this incredible magnetic vibration of, I have all this love to give. And you apparently have a lot of love to give. And we've got this chemistry, this special chemistry, and we give to each other. But so often it's just the opposite. It's, I'm empty. I need your love. You're empty. You need my love. And because it's impossible, when it doesn't work, you blame the other person for the fact that you feel empty. You promised to fill me with love, and I've been loving you and sacrificing and going through all this pain and misery to love you, to be responsible for your happiness. And this is what I get? No, this is what you had coming into the relationship, you see. So, in some senses, it's quite simple. It's just thinking backward. So, when we talk about becoming more empathetic and more compassionate and more loving as a bridge to expanded awareness and higher consciousness and the realization that all separation is really an illusion, we have to recognize it's a balanced walk. You don't want to go so far as to betray yourself and be targeted by a narcissist. And they can be very charming. And the melodrama. I've had clients send me emails of the exchanges, and you get all lost in this harlequin romance. And it is so backwards, so wrong. Love is something you give, not something you get. It's in the giving of love, in being of service to other people, that you enjoy the love that you have. It needs to move. It's like money, you know. What good is money if you don't spend it? You got to keep it moving. The food in the refrigerator, if you don't use it, if you don't eat it, if you don't make something delicious, it's going to rot. You got to keep moving it. Love is something you give, give, give. Well, if I give, where is it coming from? It's spiritual, it's divine. All love is life itself. It comes from the same, it's the same. Where does your love come from? It comes from where your breath comes from. Who's breathing you? Where do your thoughts come from when they're not deliberate and purposeful and your mind's just chattering? Where do those thoughts come from? When you say to yourself, wait a minute, on second thought, hold on a minute, let me think again. Where did that come from? Who answers when you question yourself? Which which one are you when the voices in your head argue with each other and you're ambivalent and you feel merit on both sides of the argument? Which one are you? Which of those voices? See, we don't know. We haven't figured that out. there are no classes in school on know thyself. It's all know the world, know other people, judge other people, figure them out, work for leverage, build a career, become successful, buy a bunch of stuff. Empathy and compassion and love is not something you do to fill yourself. You give that out of your bounty. You devote yourself to empathy. Again, it's a non-logical process when you say, I am committed to being more empathetic. Number one, that means being a better listener. How often I hear parents saying, and others in relationships saying, I talk and talk and talk and talk. Yeah, but are you a good listener? As long as you're talking, you're not learning anything. That ought to be obvious, but it's not to most of us. Every minute you spend speaking, you're not learning. Listening. There is such a thing as listening to yourself speak, but I don't want to make this too complicated. Listening to others, let's keep it simple, is a wonderful first step toward becoming more empathetic and more compassionate and developing the love that leads to the expanded awareness of wholeness and oneness, unity, harmony and unity. But it's also a commitment to set aside the internal dialogue, the mental chatter, and reach out with your feelings. Just sort of tune in to your feelings. Here's an example. Have you ever heard of gaze detection? Researchers believe they have isolated specialized neurons that are devoted really to knowing when somebody is staring at you, even if you're looking in the opposite direction. Now ask yourself, do I know how it feels to feel as if someone is staring at me, and I turn around quickly, and sure enough, there was somebody staring at me? How did I know that? You felt that. You turned your awareness away from thinking, into the body someplace, into the torso. Maybe it's in the heart area, maybe it's in your solar plexus. If it's fear-based, it might be even lower down in your pelvis. But it could be in the palms of your hands. Become more aware of where I know such things. Where do my feelings live? Where in my body? When I become aware of the fact that somebody is staring at me. And that's just one example of empathy, of it's almost telepathy, isn't it? There's sympathy, empathy, telepathy. How different are they really? We think of telepathy as reading their minds. It's really reading their hearts. That's where we're connected, at the heart. That's the center, right? 3 chakras below, 3 chakras above. The heart's in the middle, the 4th chakra. 3 above, 3 below. It's like the rainbow, color green. There's 3 colors above green, 3 colors below green. Green is the center. Green is the heart. Reach out. You know those situations where somebody has suffered grief and loss. Maybe someone they love died, or is about to, or is very sick and may die, or they have financial problems, or whatever the nature of the problem, it's serious, and you don't know what to say. Gosh, Michael, Those situations, I have to confess, I often avoid them because I just don't know what to say. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to say anything. You can just be there. Just sit there. Bring some food if you want. Ask them if there's something you can do to help out. You know, but it's enough just to sit there and just to listen, and then reach out with your heart and empathize. Put yourself in their situation, put yourself in their shoes. As I said, you're not going to walk around in them, they don't fit. It's just a figure of speech. You're not going to become codependent and swap feelings. You're not going to do their feelings for them, and you certainly don't need anything in return as a codependent would. Just reach out for that. Here's the phrase: sympathetic. Well, I would think of it as sympathetic oscillation, sympathetic vibration, a sympathetic resonance, sympathy, empathy, telepathy. I understand how you feel. I think I understand how you. It's hard to imagine how you must feel. Whatever seems most appropriate, because you don't want to discount. That's not being empathetic. Is to give them advice. Well, shake it off. You need to butch up. Well, you'll get over it. Well, everybody. Oh, and here's a common thing we do. Oh, that's nothing. Let me tell you about my loss and my suffering. Like that's going to help. People don't want to hear your story of how you suffered. Don't make it about you. Just share and care. Compassion is a little different. Compassion is a recognition that everyone suffers. Compassion is best employed when someone frightens you, or is trying to hurt you, or they bully you, or they manipulate you. You can free yourself from being victimized by that by looking at them with compassion and recognize that their bad behavior comes out of suffering. I want to go to the Q&A in a minute if you have a comment or a question. I'd very much like to hear from you. And you can just use the reaction button at the bottom of the Zoom page to put your hand up, and Melinda will see it and call on you. Or it's even better if you just send a chat to Melinda. She's our co-host again today. And say, I've got a comment. I've got a question. I'd like to bring you guys the closest to the old radio shows I used to do. But we had tens of thousands of listeners, so it was no problem getting a call. And if we have 20 or 25 people here, it's hardly the same. But nevertheless, I'd like to go there in just a minute. Let me make some final comments here. This is about changing yourself and changing the world. You will benefit continuously from developing your compassion and your empathy more than sympathy, reaching out, building those bridges, understanding other people. It changes you. It redeems us. It transforms us. Love heals. It makes us better people. It makes it easier to live with yourself. You become proud of who you are in a healthy way, not unhealthy pride, not ego pride, but a healthy, humble kind of a self-respect. And others benefit as well. And there's really, it goes in both directions. It's not like as you benefit, they benefit, or if you benefit them, then you benefit. It's sort of a, it's even more than a two-way street. It's like this magnetism that just grows. You become one. Don't you see? That's what we're talking about. It's not just, gosh, I understand how you feel. You're becoming them and recognizing that you have been all along. You can empathize with anybody. You can empathize with Dick Cheney promoting torture. You can empathize with Donald Trump's successes and look at and even find compassion for the degree to which these people suffer. It doesn't excuse their behavior, right? There's still bigots, there's still racists, there's still, you know, people behaving badly. It's hard to say they're horrible people. I mean, in one sense, you can say these are horrible people that do horrible things. Deplorables, I think, was the word Hillary used. It's better to say they're people behaving badly, usually because of horrible, traumatic parenting. But these are not excuses for their behavior. And you can be compassionate and empathetic without exposing yourself to their abuse. You don't have to stand there and take abuse from anybody. You can just walk away, disengage. I refuse to put myself through this abuse. But as you turn and walk away, you can allow that empathy to grow into compassion for their suffering, and that will make you a kinder, more loving, happier person. That's the goal, is just to be happy, to let go of the suffering and the discontent. This is a wonderful way to do it. Melinda, what have we got online? We have some comments or questions yet?
I think they're still percolating in people's minds out there. You said a lot this time. I'm sure somebody's about to have a comment.
What struck you?
Um, I um, I entered a sobriety program 33 years ago this week, and one of the things they said to me was, "Think it through." And that helped me a lot. And what might come if I do this, what might come, and what might the broader impact be, and where might that action go? And I was tying it into what you were talking about, specifically how you opened the class with the political turmoil. And what I saw is the lack of, I mean, sometimes it's really hard to get out of our emotional headspace. Very strong feelings kind of can hijack us, I think, uh, and make us unable to really empathize. Sometimes it's just a tall order. And but for me, I can usually say to myself, what comes next? If I reach out or lash out or don't think about this person's future, it will redound to me. So I think it ties into what you were saying, that there's only one of us here, which when I started with your class at the beginning, it was incomprehensible to me what you were talking about. I will say, I used to roll my inner eyes. I liked the message, but really? And then slowly, through various talks and looking at the nuances, it's become clear that we are all separate, and yet everything we do redounds to everybody. That's one of the things I was thinking. And that if I take my little part, like how I drive, or that has such broad implications that I don't even know. And I guess that keeps me going. And we do have a couple comments.
Great. Let me go to that and just say that one of the things that continues to fascinate me in my own introspection is that I care at all, and that human beings, by and large, unless they're completely sociopathic, and by the way, what makes a sociopath or a psychopath a deviant? It's their lack of empathy, among other things. An absolute lack of empathy. And we could tie this into conscience. They have no conscience. They have no sense that there is any other. The whole world revolves around them. And they just it's not just like a personality defect. It's a complete uh, again, it's the result of really bad parenting and horrible trauma in childhood and what I call the false assumptions that come out of that, that creates this wiring in the brain that makes it impossible to empathize, to even consider how somebody might feel. And so these people also are not in touch with their own feelings. It's not only that they cannot empathize, they they can't empathize with themselves, if you will. They can't feel their own feelings. And yet they suffer so. Again, uh, to be numb hurts. To not feel creates a horrible pain, and I know that's ironic, but it's to feel nothing is horrible. It's close to being dead. Who do you want to call on? Melinda, who's next?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Rosemary. She has a comment. I feel compassion for the Palestinians, not so much for the Israelis, who have, I feel, all the power. How can I feel compassion towards them? It's a good question. And then Larry's next.
Yeah, I think to remove everything but their humanity. You know John Lennon's song, Imagine that there is no religion. Imagine that there are no nations. Imagine that you're in a space capsule orbiting the Earth and you recognize, oh, there's no dotted lines, no boundaries, no borders. Not really. That these are the contrivances of human beings. Consider, Rose, that both sides are afraid, terrified. Both sides love their children and want peace. They don't want their children to die or suffer. They don't want their children to even be afraid. There are no Israelis. There are no Palestinians. There are no borders. That's the way I think. Huh, I think is not the right word. That's the way I feel we can approach that tendency to take a side. I feel it too. I've got an amygdala. It wants me to take a side. It tells me if I go to Dodger Stadium, I should root for the Dodgers, not the other team. But if the other team makes a great play, I'm happy that the human being has enjoyed that flying leap where he caught the ball or where he hit a home run. I can empathize and enjoy that. I don't have to choose one side or the other at the ballpark. But if I cheered for both sides, I'd draw some stares, wouldn't I? The popcorn guy might not sell me popcorn. I gotta, be careful what section I sit in. But that's just the way people are. And we still have that animal nature, always afraid. And life is tough. Doreen loves feeding the birds. And we have doves and we have quail. Quail, two of the most beautiful, and we have songbirds too. and house finches and hummingbirds, but we especially like the doves in the quail. And recently, a cat has come into our yard, and I mean, there's rattlesnakes here. There's roadrunners. There's mountain lions and coyotes. So far, all we've seen is a house cat with a collar that's obviously well fed and yet is killing birds for sport.
Mm.
So we've had to stop feeding the birds. So here we want to do a loving thing, but our loving thing is turned into
Mm.
promoting something very natural and normal that is horrific. And the world is full of horror, whether we like it or not. The hawk sweeps down and takes the rabbit. And the rabbit screams. And we say, well, that's nature. That's the way of things. Life is full of horror. The best we can do is minimize our participation in it. So we have to find a balance. How do you feed the birds but not feed the birds? How do you feed the birds, support in a loving way? But we can encourage people not to let their cats outside. But we don't know whose cat this is. It's just one example I'm pulling out of the air that no matter how much we do, there's always going to be injustice. There's always going to be cruelty. There's always going to be horror.
Yeah.
But we still have to keep plugging away, I think.
Larry's got a thought too, Mike.
Thank you for that, Rose. Larry?
Yeah, a memory popped up this morning on Facebook that I wanted to share. I don't remember who it came from, but the memory was your wounds are probably not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. I like that.
I do too. And we have to get over blaming others for the wound before we can really attend to the healing. If we fixate on you hurt me, we're not going to, the healing will not commence.
We keep what's the word I'm looking for? Refreshing or recreating
Yeah.
the wound. Yeah.
Keep pulling the scab off.
Yeah.
As my mother said, you keep picking at it, it's never going to heal.
Hanif added an interesting thought too when you get.
Go ahead.
Okay, Michael. Actually, it's a comment, and what your thoughts on that are. Does too much kindness lead to resentment because of codependence, or is it because of lack of self-understanding?
You'll have to repeat that, Hanif.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to get closer to my mic. Can you hear me better now?
I can. I just didn't understand you. It came too fast for me. Give it to me again.
I'll slow down. Does too much kindness lead to resentment? Is that
linked? Let me slow you down. Linked. I thought you said leaped.
No, leads to resentment.
Too much kindness leads to resentment?
Linked.
No, he said leads.
Leads.
Yeah, leads to resentment.
Okay.
Is it because of codependence or the lack of self-understanding?
I'm not sure I understand how too much kindness could ever be a problem, much less lead to resentment. Give me an example of what you mean.
Okay, if I guess it probably leads towards more codependence. Let's say you have an adult child, for example, that you spend who has some addiction issues, and you spend too much time kind of giving them a safety net because you think you're being kind to them.
Okay, so you're saying in the context of a codependent relationship, in that kind of a situation with a codependent relationship, being too kind could lead you to resent or maybe better said, recognize that your efforts to be supportive are just making the situation worse.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what you want me to say about that other than, let me think for a second. Mike, what would be my conclusion if I recognize that? If I'm feeling resentful or regretful in that situation, that's where I have to find a balance between unconditional kindness and so-called tough love. That's where the tough love comes in, you know. Like, I'm sorry, you're 40 years old, you're living on the couch in the basement, you're playing video games all day, you dropped out of community college, you have no job, you have no prospects for a career, you're wasting your life. I'm going to start charging you rent. I'm going to start charging you for food. I'm going to insist that you go to school or get a job or both. And here's your deadline. Otherwise, you're out of here. You're on the street. That's tough love. You got to draw a line someplace. I love you, and I can't sit by and watch you destroy your life like this.
Michael,
Just,
Rhonda added an interesting comment if we have a minute when you're done.
we do. That enough said about tough love. That's a whole tough love is another whole class. So thank you, Hanif. Thank you for that. And did you say Rhonda?
That's right. She says, I work in a high school with special needs students. I have great empathy for these kids, but I feel some teachers only see students by their assignments or grades. Their lack of perspective hinders and discourages productivity. I feel like my job is primarily recon for the students' feelings of inadequacy. Good point.
Yeah, let me ask, Rhonda, would you be willing to open your microphone for a second? We just have a minute or two here. Are you willing to come online,
Rhonda,
Rhonda?
did you want to unmute or not?
I am.
Oh, great.
I'd like to know, I understand your comment. I'd like to know what kind of response you want from me. Do you want to be more active in encouraging the other teachers to be more caring and more empathetic, or is it just a observation you have, or are you looking to change your view of things, or
It's an observation I have. What I would love to do is just be able to get, it's not all the teachers, but it is a few. And it would be really nice to just be able to persuade them to look at those children for what they are, for, being a child, first of all. And that, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of tunnel vision with the teachers that they
so
only.
when you talk about special needs kids, a lot of these kids are on the spectrum or they have emotional
Yeah.
child development problems.
They're all higher functioning students, so they are totally capable of doing the work. But I just feel like they're just viewed differently, and yeah, it's really devastating for the kids.
I would have you consider. I'm empathizing with you now. I'm trying to put myself in your situation. I can see how this would hurt you. I would have you consider the extent to which, just ponder this, reflect on this, the extent to which a person in that situation, that teacher, is not empathizing as a kind of a defense that maybe they fear they don't have the strength to sympathize, to empathize, to be compassionate, that it would be too hard for them to recognize the suffering, the challenges of those children and their families, that they're a little afraid. And so what you're perceiving as walls or barriers are put up perhaps for them unconsciously to just defend themselves because they're afraid empathy would hurt.
Mm. That is a good point.
Another thing I would do is consider talking to the teachers that you are concerned with in a very clever, empathetic, and loving way, and just sort of sound them out, like, what do they love about teaching? And why did they choose to be special ed teachers? And do you ever wish that you were just working with academically advanced kids? And what are some of the challenges that he or she faces in the classroom? And
Hmm.
sidle up to them, buddy up to them on a professional level and sound them out a little bit, because this feels to me less of a judgment, you judging them. I think it's less that than, in a way, it feels like it's hurting you to see a few of your coworkers not caring as much as you do.
And also feeling the frustration of my children who are like doing the best they can. You know, they're really putting forth the effort, and then the teacher is just like, oh, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough thing, but I do understand like that I need to change my perspective of those teachers. That is really good advice right there.
Good.
Yeah,
That's it. See, I'm so happy you came online. Thank you, Rhonda.
me too.
Okay, Mindy, thank you. Anything before we go? Melinda, are we good?
Yeah, I thought Rhonda's discussion was really thought provoking, and I was envisioning somehow a casual group of all the teachers being able to put their little comment in and share their views. Somehow that can be very powerful too.
Yeah, you mean if we have other teachers here on this
Well,
class?
or actually her going into the school and saying, anybody want to, get together for a coffee and a chat, just the teachers in a kind of a confidential, what are you feeling about teaching and all, because it's a tough profession. Maybe just a common sharing of things, listening in a non-judgmental forum might be interesting.
It's a good idea. I think it might be too big a piece to bite off all at once. That's why I suggested one
Yeah,
at a time.
yeah, that's a more doable. Sure.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
approach it slowly.
Mhm.
Uh, Good class. I enjoyed it today. Thank you so much for being here. I have an opening still in the Saturday Salon, which is limited to 10. And if you're interested in being part of that, go to michaelbenner.com, click on personal development training and counseling, and you can read all about it. And just send me an email if you are interested in joining the intensive. It really is an incredible discussion group. It's a round table and transformative conversation, and a little more advanced even, metaphysically, a little more advanced. Saturday Salam at 11 Pacific time.
Michael, how do you do a round table on the Zoom?
We just have conversation. I pose an issue, a question, an idea, and then we talk about it. We just go around the room.
I see.
Yeah, works real well. Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank
Namaste, aloha, salam. See you next Sunday. Have a wonderful week. And unmute
you
and say
very much.
goodbye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye.
joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.